Will you wear a Guardian cap?
Nope.
Why?
Personal choice.
I appreciate your concern. I really do. I love this game, and I love it to the death of me. That's it.
This storyline is without a doubt one of the most bizarre storylines I think I've ever covered in my entire career, and I know I say this a lot, but in this particular instance, you are getting a full-fledged failure from the Miami Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa, and also every individual around him. Now, bear in mind, I never said in the past that Tua needs to retire, but at a specific point, what's going on with Tua is just absolutely reckless. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help us grind to 1 million subscribers. And now that we get all that out of the way, we dominated opening night on Prize Picks, hitting on the Anthony Edwards free square and making an easy $75, and then making another $150 on my Hauser LeBron James picks. We had a lot of NFL success as well, all in all making about $400 over the past week. Now, if you haven't signed up for Prize Picks, make sure you use my promo code Mikerophone to get a free $50 when you make an entry of $5 or more. I give away my picks for free on Instagram at @TheFlightMike or Snapchat at FlightMikeSnap, and thank you Prize Picks for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I've always been empathetic towards Tua Tagovailoa's NFL career, primarily because I genuinely wanted to see this young man succeed. And in my opinion, I think he has already succeeded. Dolphins fans were clamoring for Tua in 2019. There was this huge tank for Tua campaign, and eventually the Dolphins got the opportunity to draft Tua in the 2020 NFL draft. Now, apparently at this point, ownership didn't want Tua anymore, and there was this huge dispute between Brian Flores and ownership, where the team owner was willing to pay Brian Flores $100,000 per game that he lost, so the Dolphins could tank to get the #1 overall pick and eventually draft Joe Burrow, but alas, that didn't happen, and they selected Tua. Tua and Brian Flores had a very contentious relationship.
You have a terrible person that's telling you things that you don't want to hear, you're going to start to believe that about yourself. And so that's sort of like what ended up happening.
And the Brian Flores era was very shaky with Tua under center, because on one hand, Brian Flores' coaching style didn't really work with Tua, and granted, Flores was also a defensive head coach, but on top of that, the Miami Dolphins were consistently in trade rumors that involved Deshaun Watson. Thank goodness that they didn't end up doing that, but at the time, it made a lot of sense. Bear in mind, at this point, Deshaun Watson was one of the best QBs in the NFL, without a doubt a top 3 quarterback in the NFL at that point. But the Dolphins ended up staying pat. After the 2021 season, not only did they punt on Deshaun Watson, but they decided to hire Mike McDaniel, a move that at the time a lot of people thought was unnecessary. The Dolphins were doing just fine with Brian Flores as their head coach. Yeah, they weren't making it to the playoffs, but they were getting very close to doing so. But in 2022, everything changed. Mike McDaniel came on board. The Dolphins made a huge trade for Tyreek Hill. Next thing you know, Tyreek Hill is saying stuff like this.
As far as accuracy-wise, I'm going with Tua all day.
But fans were still wondering whether or not Tua was good enough to be the starting quarterback on a Super Bowl contending team. Did he have the arm that Patrick Mahomes did in order to throw footballs to Tyreek Hill? He was getting memed in training camp for underthrowing Tyreek Hill. But when the regular season started, in his first season underneath Mike McDaniel, Tua showed a lot of promise. But there were some hiccups in between. During week 3 of the 2022 NFL season, Tua would suffer a late hit against Matt Milano. Now, bear in mind, he would complete this pass to Jalen Waddle, which would make it all the more impressive, but when he stood back up, he stumbled to get to the huddle. Now, I don't understand how Tua was able to convince all of his teammates and Mike McDaniel that he was okay, but he stayed for the rest of the game, and he led the Dolphins to a 21-19 victory. He even dismissed the injury as a back injury.
Kind of got my legs caught under someone, and then they were trying to push back, and then kind of felt like I hyperextended my back or something. And then on the next play, I kind of hit my back and kind of hurt, and then I got up, and then that's kind of like why I stumbled. My back kind of locked up on me. But for the most part, I'm good past whatever concussion protocol they had, so I'm good.
despite suffering a clear concussion, 4 days later, Tua would play in Thursday Night Football. Now, here's the craziest part. The NFLPA would initiate an investigation into the handling of Dolphins QB Tua Tagovailoa's concussion check during their game against the Bills. But the Dolphins were supposed to play on Thursday Night Football, so 4 days later, Tua played Thursday Night Football despite having a concussion, and we all know what would happen next. Tua would suffer one of the most gruesome hits we've ever seen in NFL history. I mean, the way he took this hit and the way his hands acted following this hit was it was really brutal to watch. This was considered a huge failure upon the NFL for not undergoing legitimate concussion testing, and Tua would be out for the next 3 weeks of the NFL season. The good news was Tua was playing the best football of his career. The man threw for over 3,500 passing yards, 25 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. Clearly trading for Tyreek Hill and bringing in Mike McDaniel changed everything for him. He even finished within the top 10 for MVP voting, completed 65% of his passes, won 8 of the 13 games he played in. But at the same time, there's this huge question of whether or not Tua should continue his career, because in week 16 of the 2022 season, once again, Tua would suffer another concussion against the Green Bay Packers. This is despite completing 16 of his 25 passes for 310 yards and a touchdown. He would not play for the rest of the season, including the playoff game that the Dolphins had planned. Now, during this offseason, there is a lot of people wondering whether or not Tua should consider retirement. And again, very legitimate claim, very legitimate concerns. Tua's parents weren't amongst those that were concerned for their kids' safety, because the mom and dad had this to say about Tua's potential retirement.
Oh, he comes back. Yeah, he comes back. You know what I'm saying? And that's their guy. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, they love him. We love them and what they're doing and how they're, helping him with his recovery and everything else, trying to get him back.
It's truly insane, and I don't typically like to think that parents are more concerned with money than the health of their kids' well-being. And I'm not here to insinuate anything, but I do want to mention that Tua was very, very close to earning a maximum contract from the Miami Dolphins. I mean, he just needed to ball out for one more year. If he was able to repeat and have a career year, then the Dolphins would have to sign him to a max contract. So Tua took things very seriously during the 2023 offseason, deciding to take some judo and jiu-jitsu classes to ensure that he was more capable of taking hits. But the Miami Dolphins were not going to go in without a contingency plan. They also signed Mike White to make sure their bases were covered in the event that Tua had a similar season and got injured. Tua would have the best season of his career during the 2023 season. I mean, he played in all 17 games, threw for a career high 4,624 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. He finished top 5 in comeback player of the year voting, made it to his first Pro Bowl. He was able to lead the Miami Dolphins to a playoff game, and he got his first little taste of playoff action. The Dolphins were so confident in Tua's abilities that they decided to cut Mike White just a few weeks before the 2024 season. And then, in week 2 of the 2024 season, Tua would suffer another major concussion. And this one was probably the most concerning at all, because out of all the concussions and all of the hits that Tua had suffered at this point, I believe this one looked the least gruesome. And the more concussions you sustain, the easier it is to get a concussion. It was a hit that he took when he was trying to stiff arm Damar Hamlin. And this was despite Buffalo blowing out the Miami Dolphins. I mean, it was a garbage time TD. At the time, Mike McDaniel had this to say:
"It would be so wrong of me to even sniff that subject. It's more in line actually caring about the human being. You're talking about his career, right? His career is his. I totally get how that's where people want to go to. I just wish that people would for a second hear what I'm saying, that bringing up his future is not in the best interest of him."
So at the end of the day, there were questions about whether or not Tua should retire. Things are way different. Tua earned a huge contract extension from the Miami Dolphins. The man is getting paid $212 million over the next 4 years, which is a $53 million annual salary to be the quarterback of the Dolphins. The craziest thing is, if Tua is to retire, this is what happens to his contract. Out of his $212 million extension, $167 million is guaranteed. If he retires this season, he could forfeit some of the money, and of the $167 million in guarantees in his contract, 43 will go to Tua as a signing bonus, and his signing bonus is spread out over 5 annual installments worth more than $8 million each. Tua will still receive that bonus whether he retires or not. In some cases, the full amount of a signing bonus is sent to a player the day he signs a contract, but his contract stipulates that the team will pay him $1.1 million in salary this year and between $25 million and $41 million in salary between 2025 and 2028. If he's medically forced into retirement, he has a right to collect the $124 million that remain. So originally, there was a huge question of whether or not Tua was financially motivated to continue playing, and you could say some of it has to do with a financial motivation to continue playing, because he gets paid more money if he obviously plays for the Miami Dolphins. I mean, don't get me wrong, getting $124 million to not play football sounds like a sweet deal as well, but at the same time, the human element of this is, although it's very easy for us to sit in our chairs and look at Tua and say, hey, this guy should retire, considering the amount of head trauma he suffered this early into his career, you have to also understand that this is an individual that has prepared for the game of football his entire life. And fortunately for Tua, there are specific precautions that he can now take place in order to ensure that he is going to be okay when he plays under center. I mean, the new Guardian cap, for instance, is a way that Tua could protect himself. Guardian caps are large, soft shell pads that are worn over football helmets, with the objective of reducing the risk of concussions and other head injuries during play. The cap can absorb 10% of the force of a hit, and some players already wear it currently, like Jabril Peppers, Kylan Granson, Rodney Thomas, Josh Wiley. A reporter asked Tua whether or not he planned on wearing one.
Will you wear a Guardian cap?
Nope.
Why?
Personal choice.
I mean, look, man, it's just at a specific point, it seems like this young man has absolutely no regard for his own safety. I mean, the way he suffered this past injury was just diving headfirst into a defender, and this is one of the most divisive topics in the NFL right now. A lot of people seem to be concerned, except for Tyreek Hill. I don't think I've ever seen an individual that's more excited for a player to return than Tyreek Hill. I mean, look at this.
We're back, baby. Strike up the fucking band. We're back, baby. Start me this week, baby. Let's go.
I love how Tyreek Hill is acting like he wasn't just trying to get the Kansas City Chiefs to trade for him by cryptically posting his Kansas City Chiefs highlight footage onto his Snapchat story. I mean, Tyreek Hill's a funny guy. I mean, I'd be excited if Tua came back too, considering that Tyreek is up for a contract extension within the next couple of years. But Tua seems to be very hell-bent on the way he wants to handle this situation.
I appreciate your concern. I really do. I love this game, and I love it to the death of me. That's it.
It's very important to note that Ryan Clark hasn't heard a single medical professional claim that Tua needs to retire.
Yeah, so I talked to someone in Miami and they said that Tua Tagovailoa underwent extensive testing, both emotionally, physically, every scan you could possibly do to say that he was fit to return to the football field. And not one doctor, not one medical professional told him he should consider retiring.
At the same time, I really am curious to know which medical professionals are saying that Tua is better off playing football than staying in football. Look, at the end of the day, I can understand how hard it is for an individual to work his entire life only to be told that despite reaching the pinnacle of his career, he might need to retire because of the amount of concussions he's taken. I could understand how difficult that could be for a young man, and I've never said that Tua should retire. I'm saying at least be a little bit more careful, man. I mean, you could be the face of Guardian caps in the NFL. You could be the individual that causes a bunch of players to realize that they need to protect themselves from head trauma. You could really leverage this situation for some good if you opted to wear the Guardian cap, because right now everyone thinks they look terrible. I understand it's a very difficult situation. I just wish he wasn't so reckless about it, and I really wish he understood the severity of this decision. Let me know in the comment section down below, do you think Tua is making the wrong decision? I like to hear what you have to say. Apart from that, a huge trade is coming into the NFL, and a huge trade has already happened in the NFL. The Chiefs traded for DeAndre Hopkins, and the Rams might be looking to trade for Cooper Kupp. I have 2 videos diving into these topics, and I'll leave them in the end screen and meet you there. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.